Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, especially those of you that are double dipping. And I saw you yesterday for almost the same presentation, but of course, we'll have a little bit different spin on it today. I appreciate your questions out loud and in the chat, however you want to portray those. I encourage you to use the chat just because we'll have a transcript with that through Zoom. So if you do come along something, and then we'll be able to address it. We're obviously here to look at Canvas quizzing because that's the calendar invite that you accepted. So we're going to dive deep into kind of the overall setup of a quiz. We're going to look at the difference between using Canvas quizzing and using Canvas quizzing with Respondus Lockdown Browser, which is just another setting on top of that. And then we're also going to look at how to kind of take some of the resources that might be available through your publisher and put those things inside of your Canvas class. So we'll look at a bunch of things today. So obviously we have an hour of our time now. We could probably make this more than an hour, but I don't want to take your time doing that today. So obviously if you come up with any questions or there's something like, oh, I wish I could spend more time with that, or, oh, I need to try that out, please send me an email, let me know so that you and I can meet one-on-one and we can do those things and get them done. I try to make myself available at most hours, and that's certainly the case these days since I've been a bachelor for like 2 weeks at this point, so I don't even know what to do with myself. But yeah, so I have time, so certainly reach out and we can clean up any clarifications. I'm going to start with a basic question. I'm going to launch a poll from my Zoom meeting, and I would love for you to answer this question. So very basic, of course, this is a completely different feature that I'm using here than what you're in this professional development for, but this is polling inside of Zoom, a great way to foster some engagement and create attention capturing activities within your class. Great way to look at some multiple choice questions and talk about distractors and talk about question stems. All those things are kind of in there. Of course, we can cover quizzes, or I'm sorry, polls inside of Zoom at another time. For those of you who were in our session yesterday, we talked about that a little bit, how to create polls and all those things. For these meetings, only the host has polls down at the bottom. So if you're moving your mouse back and forth and you're like, oh, where's the polls? I can't see it. You don't have polls unless you're the host. And obviously that's meant for, as an instructor tool within our course. So let's look at this. I want to end my polling. I have 10 out of 10. I'm going to share my results so you can see what people said, and a great way to share the results within your classroom as well. So have we used Canvas quizzing before? We have 4 individuals that say that they have, 6 that say that they haven't, and thankfully no one says Canvas what. So a beautiful thing. So I'm going to stop share of my results and know that we kind of have almost similar to what we had yesterday. We had some that had done it a little bit, others that had not done it at all. I'm certainly trying to capture all audiences here, those of us that are very novice and some of us that are just trying to take it to another step. So hopefully we can do that. And then of course, if we need to build on some of those novice skills at another time, we can certainly do that at a later time. All right, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to apologize beforehand because the camera that I'm using is on my laptop in front of me, and I'm going to be using a bigger monitor to the right. So the entire time you're probably going to see the side of my face while I'm sharing my screen. It's not that I don't want to see you, it's just that I'm trying to get a better view of what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to share. Perfect. And at this time you should see my front page, my Canvas dashboard. Just give me a head nod if that's the case. Fabulous. Feel free to use your reactions within Canvas at the bottom. You could give me a thumbs up or clap your hands or whatever that might be if we're asking for some clarification in different scenarios. But today we're here to look at quizzing. I'm going to jump into one of my courses, in this case, my Informatics course that is running right now. And for those of you that attended yesterday, this is a great opportunity for you to see what got imported into this course. Because when we left yesterday, we were importing a massive package from the publisher, which takes a little bit of time to do, and you didn't see the end result. So the end result is done. So those of you that were here yesterday, you kind of see the back end of it. Those of you that were not here yesterday, it'll all make sense in the end. I'm truly not trying to confuse you. Okay, so when I look at quizzes here on the left-hand side, notice that it is in my left-hand menu without the non-C eyeball next to it. We have found some courses, and there are some templates out there where the quizzes function is not visible, meaning you have this eyeball that's crossed out next to quizzes. Okay, so if you are using the quizzes function inside of your Canvas platform, you want to make sure that you make that setting visible for the students. Of course, if you take that quiz and you put it inside of a module, it will be visible inside of the module as well, but we want to give the students the opportunity to click right on quizzes and see the list of quizzes in a linear fashion that they're going to be responsible for at that time. So if you do need to move that by chance, you just come down here to settings and hit on navigation. And inside of navigation, you can take these pieces, move them around, drop them in any order that you would like. Here's my quizzes down at the bottom. If I think that that's something that I want to be more towards the top of the menu and more pertinent for my class, I'm just dropping it up and holding it in the menu. The same way you would move a file in a folder or move something on your desktop. You're holding your mouse down and sliding it up. Okay, perfect. Down at the bottom, make sure you save. So my quizzes is now in my new spot up here almost at the top. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump into quizzes and take a look at this. You'll notice that I have a very long list of quizzes at the moment. These are all the quizzes that were imported from the publisher's package yesterday. So if you joined us yesterday, there was nothing on this page at the beginning of the session. But because we went through the steps to get all this information in here, you can see that from the publisher, we got 40 questions for 73 chapters. So you have an immense amount of information inside of these quizzes for you to use for your pre and post, or for anything outside of those pre and post concepts or content that you think the students might need a little bit more work on. Okay, so you have immense amount of things at your fingertips. Of course, it provides itself for an opportunity to clean it up. Okay, we obviously need to go in there and make sure that those are the questions we want to ask, make sure they are good questions, make sure they're set up correctly. In this case, we do not suggest having a pre and post with 40 questions. That would be entirely too many questions for what we're looking for here. This is a more informal kind of setting. We're not looking for a summative, we are looking for a summative assessment, not a formative assessment, right? Or vice versa there. So we want to make sure that we're making this kind of more of a low stakes environment for the students. So the 40 questions would be a little high. Notice also that not only is it 40 questions, but it's 40 points, meaning that each question is worth 1 point. So when you get into the questions types and some of the settings we're going to look at, you do have the opportunity to change the points there. We talked about this yesterday too. I would suggest that you're using a uniform number for points. If there's 10 questions, it's worth 10 points. If there's 10 questions, it's worth 100 points. But let's not do 7 questions, 7 points, 5 questions, 5 points. Then we have the whole, well, why is the grade book this and the percentages turn out this way? Because the numbers aren't uniform across the board. And we're not just saying it's worth the points. These points are then part of a percentage in a whole piece in the grade. So there's a lot of math going on there when we say 7, 6, 5, 8, 11, whatever that might be. So pick a number. Your quizzes are worth 10 points. Your quizzes are worth 100 points, whatever works best for you, but try to stick to that number, not only for your peace of mind, but also for the students' peace of mind as well. You know, a nice uniform number to work with. What I want to draw your attention to down here is this unnamed quiz. Notice that my unnamed quiz at the bottom has a message at the end of it that says requires Respondus lockdown browser. Anytime that setting is enabled on any of the quizzes in Canvas, that little blurb appears after the quiz automatically. Okay, so if you're just creating a generic quiz the same way Chapter 73 is created here, Chapter 73 does not require the Respondus lockdown browser. You're able to take that directly in Canvas. Okay, so if we do have the requires lockdown browser, what that is, for those of us that are not familiar, is it's a whole nother browser that students use to take the test. Okay, so they're not using Firefox, they're not using Chrome, they're not using Safari, they're using the Respondus Lockdown browser. Okay, so when they go into the quiz, they are prompted to either launch that browser if they've already downloaded it, or if it's the first time, the same way sometimes we have to download Zoom for the first time on a new computer, they have to download the Respondus Lockdown browser to start. I would say for the most part, the majority of us are not going to be using the Respondus Lockdown browser. All of our high-stake testing is done inside of ExamSoft. Okay, so if you're looking for something to be locked down and something needs that type of security, we have that system in place for ExamSoft. We have admins in place for that, and students are already paying for that. So if we're looking for a more formal setting, I would push you towards the ExamSoft world. But as we're working here and we're looking more for an informal setting, our pre and post quiz per se, not necessarily responding or using the Respondus Lockdown browser in this case. But we will look at how to turn that on inside of a quiz just so you have that information. Okay, I'm going to start by coming up to the very top of my quiz page and looking for my yellow button that exists everywhere on Canvas. And in this case, because I'm doing quizzes, it's my plus quiz button. Okay, notice that when I do plus quizzes, I open to a page that has two tabs, very self-explanatory. You land on the details page, which is all the details and the information, the if, ands, and buts about the quiz. And then you have the questions tab, which is where you design the questions that are on the quiz. Okay, so right here on the first page, we're giving all the information that we need to in order for that quiz to get started. First question, right? What's the quiz called? What's the title? I would stick here to a uniform name. If you're doing the pre-test, post-test model, we're naming it pre-test, module 1, pre-test, chapter 2, whatever wording you use inside of your specific course, I would encourage you to accompany that with the terms pre-test and post-test. So why would we do that? Well, first of all, we would do that for clarification of ourselves, because if you're creating a bunch of these, you want to be able to see that in a linear view. But also for students, if they're troubleshooting or they need information and they're typing an email out to you, we want to be as specific as possible as what you need to go in and fix or what your instructional technologist needs to go in and fix. So if everything kind of has names all over the place and we go in there, it's kind of like just jumping into a ball pit. We don't really know what's going on. But if we go in and we have all of our pre-tests in one place, all of our post-tests in one place, you have them either labeled with modules or chapters, it's very easy for someone who's troubleshooting, yourself or myself, or it's easy for the user who needs help to be able to identify what they need help with. Okay, so it's the same thing that we would use and the same kind of best practices we would use inside of setting up our modules inside of Canvas. If it's in module 1, we're labeling it module 1, and we're using that nomenclature all the way throughout module 1 so that students are aware of that. Okay, so we want to develop those same kind of practices inside of our quiz here. Let me see at my chat real quick. Can I make the screen bigger? I'm sure I can. How's that? A little bit better? I apologize. I like to see a lot, so when I'm sharing my screen, sometimes that is a little small, but thank you for bringing that up. So my screen is now bigger. I'm going to name here, and I'll start here with module, or how about I do pre-test module 1, okay? Now that is just the title of the quiz, so I don't have to put all the information. If this is about different chapters or an article or a specific day the lecture took place, I can provide that information down here in my details the same way I do anywhere else in Canvas in this HTML box. So I can type out, this quiz covers module 1, chapter 4, if I could write, chapter 4 and 5. Okay, so because this is a pre-quiz and the students are taking this before, we want to kind of point them to the place that they should have been getting this information from, right? So here we're giving them a little bit of insight that here this information is coming from chapter 4 and chapter 5. You don't necessarily need to put that, but just a little bit more insight into that. As we make our way down, know that here is your quiz type. This is a graded quiz. Most likely you have some points assigned to it. You're allowing the Canvas gradebook to go through and grade it for you. All of the work is being done on the back end. You can make it a practice quiz, but the practice quiz does not give you the opportunity to put it towards a point value in Canvas. And since the majority of us are using this as a percentage value inside of our course as a whole, we want it to be a graded quiz because our points equal a grade, which then equals the percent, which then equals the final grade, right? So you want that piece of the puzzle. Keep that graded quiz a graded quiz option in this instance. We're putting it into a category. Here you're saying which category inside of assignments does this sleep, right? So ideally you have a quizzes category, or you have a pre-quiz category or a post-quiz category, and all you're doing is you're telling the system where to put that. Because I'm in my informatics class and we don't have any quizzes, I don't have a quiz category. So I just have participation, resume and cover letter, EHR, HIPAA, and late assignments. So because I don't have that, I'm just gonna go with participation to start. But I would encourage you to make a quiz category because just like those other things inside of your classes, your quizzes count for a certain percentage towards the final grade. So they need to be their own category inside of assignments. I have some questions popping up, so I'm gonna pause here for a second. That's perfectly fine. You can certainly do complete and incomplete for the pre and post. Just know that that automatically gives them full credit. So if you're perfectly fine with giving them full credit towards that information, it's just that they actually did it, that's perfectly fine. Sounds good to me.
Andrew, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
That was mine, because what I wanted, you know, like when you do like a CE or whatever, like you're coming in, you don't really know the information. So I was kind of modeling it like that, like complete, incomplete, and the grade would go to the last one. So are you saying that they're going to get, like, if I make it for 0 points, my pre-test, and just say complete, incomplete, and then post-test for 10 points, does that work?
Well, yeah, I really think probably in your case, Brenda, if that's the way you're thinking of it, what I would suggest you do is you still have the point value, right? Because students still want to know what points were achieved, and explain to them in the beginning of the semester the way you're setting it up. But because I'm assuming in your syllabus, those quizzes are still worth a certain percentage of the grade, right? We're saying quizzes are worth 10% or 15% of the entire grade.
Yeah, it's same percentage. Just the idea was that I am going to give them the same post, you know, so that if they paid attention, good
Okay.
for you, you figured it out,
Okay.
you got it. But I don't want to show them rationales. I just want to know that they did it.
Right.
And at the end, they'll see the same, you know, and then maybe
Okay.
they'll catch on after a couple of weeks that that's sort of the way it goes.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. So then in your case, you would still have the quizzes category, but as the whole, because you're looking at them as complete, incomplete, that quizzes category counts as 0. So when quizzes are all done, you count that as 0, and then you have a whole separate assignment that is just whatever you call it in your grade book, pre-post quizzes,
Okay.
and you give them that out of 100. You did all of them, you get 100. You missed 2, you get a 90. You know, whatever you decide to come up with in that way. But because they're still worth a percentage, we need a place in the grade book to put that percentage. So we would need a whole separate category there. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I'm sure.
Okay. And we can look at that individually
I'm
to
sure
separate.
I'll be in touch
To
with
set
you
that up
once
for
I get
sure.
stuff in. Thanks.
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah. So obviously a couple different ways that you can do it. It's all about the way that you approach it. If you decide to do, you know, the pre and post is the same questions, I could see why you might lean a little bit more towards the complete, incomplete, because they're seeing the same thing over again. But that's all in the way you set it up. Okay, so we can look at that, and you can reflect on that as we go through, because you're going to see a lot of questions. So that might change your mind when we see what actually comes from the publisher. Because in a lot of those, you know, you mentioned the rationale and stuff. The rationale is all in that publisher stuff. So you don't have to put any of that stuff in. You're just making sure that the question is appropriate. But we'll look at that in a little bit. Okay, so we'll modify that a little bit. All right, so let me stick to my graded quiz here. Putting in participation category. Obviously, you have a couple options here: shuffling the answers, self-explanatory, my B's, not your B, my C's, not your C. So if students are talking, they can't say, hey, I chose A. Well, my A might not be your A. So you can certainly shuffle the answers. You can put a time limit on it. You can allow multiple attempts. You can let students see their responses and the answers to the questions, and certainly you can put a date and time when those things are released. Again, all of these things are features and options that you can take into account on your own. When you do the import from the publisher, none of these things are turned on. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you do want these things to be turned on, you will then additionally need to go in and turn them on in everything you bring over if you're using it in that fashion. So it is just another step. So just kind of keep that in mind. You're like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. Well, okay, you're making a whole lot more work for yourself in kind of what we're trying to create a more informal, kind of testing circumstance. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through this. Another option is show one question at a time. That means one question is displayed on a page. I have to hit forward to go to the next. If that is not checked, every question shows up on the entire page. Again, that's up to you. We know that in ExamSoft, we only see one question at a time, and I cannot go forward and backwards. If you would like the students to see the questions before and maybe build off some of those questions before, some of those are good test taking strategies, especially for our students in the beginning, using that knowledge and some of those things that you see in one part of the test and applying some of those skills and concepts and diagrams, whatever they might be, in another part of the test. Okay, so all of that is part of being a good test taker. So especially with some of our students early on here, we're trying to foster those good habits. Okay, we're not trying to squish those things. We're trying to make these students good test takers so they can succeed on their formal assessments, their midterms and their finals, and certainly succeed at the end of the day on the NCLEX, at the end of senior year. So we're trying to build these skills inside of them. So we want them to be successful. We want to give them opportunities to be successful. So this isn't us trying to catch them. Okay, that we're not here trying to fool them. So let's try to develop those things. And if that means showing all the questions on one page and allowing students to see, oh, I answered this for number one, well, that can't be right for number one because this is the answer down here. So they're kind of rethinking and doing that reflection practice that, yes, isn't always done in our formal settings, but those are all skills that need to be built for some of these students as they move forward. So this is an opportunity to kind of build those without you necessarily doing it in the classroom. You're letting Canvas and the quizzing function build those for you. Some quiz restrictions here: require an access code. Again, I would not encourage that. That is just something else that you have to give out to students, right? You would have to email them or send them an announcement of what the access code is to actually get in. So it's one more housekeeping thing. I could see in cases where that might be something you want to use, but I don't think in what we're doing it for now, that's something. And then of course we can always filter IP addresses. That is above and beyond. That's something that we could do if we had all of our students in one setting and we only wanted a group or a beginning 3 parts of an IP address to be able to access the quiz. We could say we only want, this type of computer or this type of IP address. We don't need that at this time. So again, a whole nother setting. I have some questions barking up, so give me 1 second here. Hover, thank you. Can we give students with accommodations more time? Yes, you can. Absolutely. When you go in and you create the quiz, I will show you where that setting is. After the quiz is created, you go to a separate setting on the right-hand side, and you can tell the system that the students have more time. Now, again, if you're putting the time limits on the quiz, that's something that will have to be done for each individual quiz. Okay, it is not like ATI when we can say this student always gets this function. Okay, unfortunately, that does not exist inside of Canvas. So if Sally Ann always gets time and a half, I have to go into every single pre and post quiz and give Sally Ann a time and a half. So what's the way to combat that? Don't put a time limit on it, and then you won't have to do that. So it's really up to you. If you want to do that time limit, that's perfectly fine, but know that you would have to go in and make that accommodation on each one if you wanted to do that. After that, we have who we're assigning this quiz to, which in most cases is everyone, right? We want to give the quiz to the entire class. And then when is it due? When is it available from and until when? So these are the same things, same settings we have for an assignment. And really, this is the same great feature we have for an assignment as well. If you look underneath our assign to, we have the add button. So if for some reason you assign this to everyone and it closes on a Sunday, and someone gets a hold of us on a Monday and they had a circumstance where they couldn't do the quiz and they're excused. You want to give them the opportunity to still take that quiz. All you do is come down here, hit add, and now in my assign button, I can pick Kaylee to have that quiz for an extra 24 hours or up until a certain date or up until a certain time. Okay, you can add multiple students there. So if you had 2 or 3 people that maybe needed an excused absence. So instead of opening them for everyone, which would allow everybody from Bob to Sue to take the quiz, to look at the quiz again and see the results again, you're opening it for everyone. Here, I just want to open it for those specific people. So I'm adding an assign criteria to this particular quiz for those students. Another way that we talked about this yesterday as well is if you had groups in Canvas, right? And you have a group of students that you know is going to struggle on a certain concept or content, or you have the same 4 or 5 students that, heaven forbid, are struggling across multiple modules. If you put those same 4 or 5 students inside of a quiz, you can then say, I assign this group a quiz. And then that group maybe has the quiz for longer. Or maybe it's a completely different quiz. Maybe you give them the quiz again because they didn't do good on it. You know, there's a whole bunch of kind of different ways to do that. But know that just because we kind of have everyone in the class, we can make modifications across the board as to whether it needs to be assigned to a certain individual again for a longer time, or it can even be assigned to another group a second time, or be a completely different quiz assigned to that second group a second time. So a couple different ways and scenarios that stuff can go on. And then, of course, if those circumstances come up across the board, we can have those conversations, you know, when they come up. But for the most part, I would think 90% of the time, it's you going in and adding a single student because they had a legitimate excuse when they couldn't get the quiz done. But certainly there is other opportunities to do that. So in that case, I'm going to just assign to everyone, leave my settings the way they are, and again, come down here and hit my save. And I'm still getting the information that my quiz is unpublished. Notice I didn't do anything with the questions, right? The only thing I did here was save the settings of the quiz, and there's a reason for that. It's all on the same page. So heaven forbid I don't hit that save button. I did all the settings. I went into the questions part and I lose power. Or I walk away and my computer shuts down, right? Now I didn't have the option saved. So when you get through that, you get to the bottom of that list, you get to the assign to, hit the save button. That way the options are saved, the wording's saved, the settings are saved, all of those things that you just spent time on are saved. Best practice, same thing we do with our Word documents, our PowerPoints, we're saving constantly in case something happens. We're doing that same thing when we're working in Canvas here, okay? Because it's not gonna say, oh, it looks like your browser closed. Would you like to restore this page? It's not gonna come back because all of those are text fields. So we wanna make sure we're saving that. I'm gonna go back in here to edit so I can actually go from my details tab over to my questions tab, right? And this is where I'm actually creating the questions that I'm going to see on the quiz, right? These are the questions that the students are going to answer. Notice up at the top, I'm getting a little bit of information. My quiz is currently worth 0 points. Why? Because I have 0 questions and it's not published. So very easy. I have a couple tabs here. Self-explanatory. New question is creating a new question. New question group would be exactly that. Do you have a group of questions you want to put together? Maybe if your quiz is module 1, but it's on chapters 4 and chapters 5, maybe you want to group chapter 4 and chapter 5 together. Well, why would you do that? Well, in the analytics of the quiz, it will then tell you the group analytics. So not only will you see the question analytics about how students performed on each question, you can see how they performed on chapter 5 questions, how they performed on chapter 4 questions, and that stuff is kind of grouped for you together on the data side. So if you want to go the extra step and do that, that's perfectly fine. If you, again, just have 10 questions and you're perfectly fine with just seeing the statistics for those 10 questions, that's perfectly fine too. So a couple options here. We can group them or we can just do our singles. And then you have find questions here, which loads up your question bank. And again, those of you that were here yesterday, this was not here because we hadn't done the import here. But look what this did. This took everything all all the questions from my import. This is chapter 10, chapter 11, and you see all my chapters along the left-hand side. I can choose these questions to put into this quiz that I'm creating. But all of these questions already exist in the chapter 7 quiz that you and I saw at the beginning of this session, and the chapter 10 quiz that you and I saw at the beginning. So these questions already exist somewhere, but maybe they need a little bit remediation. Maybe you know they struggled on chapter 8 and chapter 9, so you're going to go pull some individual questions from there and create a whole nother quiz. So after you do that import, that gives you the opportunity here on this screen to see those questions in a quiz bank, right? Otherwise, you're copying and pasting that stuff over. Because we did that import, you don't need to do that. So we'll kind of bring that back again. A little bit confusing for those of you that weren't here yesterday, but you'll see how that ties in at the end once I show you what the import looks like. So in this case, I'm starting from scratch. So I'm just going to do a new question, right? I'm creating my own question. I'm calling this question number 1. If you do not put anything up here, it just defaults to question. So if there's something that you want to give a little bit more information about, those of you who use Qualtrics, we talk about this. Instead of it being Q1, maybe it's Q1 demo, because in question 1, you're talking about the demographics. You know, so here, maybe in Q1, I'm talking about the lungs. You know, you can always put a separate piece of information there. You could always say, I'm talking about the stomach, or some kind of information there. Or you just put Q1. Again, it's up to the user, but it gives you an opportunity to make it a little bit more individualized depending on how you're trying to view the data on the back end. Self-explanatory, what kind of question is it? In this case, I'm making a multiple choice question. True and the false, fill in the blank, multiple answer. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. You can go through. I don't have time to go through all of these today, so we're just going to look at the multiple choice to start. True and false is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, we just have the 2 choices. What I want to caveat with the fill in the blanks, because the fill in the blanks are awesome, and we do hear that, you know, from a test taking point, it requires more of a knowledge understanding for the students to be able to come up with the term on their own than it would for them to be able to choose the correct answer out of A, B, C, and D, right? They have to come up with the term. They have to be able to recall that word. The downfall here to the fill in the blank in Canvas quizzing is it is very particular into what you accept. So if you as the instructor type the word with a capital letter, and the students type the word with a lowercase letter, the system types it as wrong. Now, what you can do as the instructor is you can say that I'll accept these 4 answer choices, and the system will grade all of those as correct. But again, if the student does a misspelling, or they use an acronym, or they use a capital letter somewhere, and you don't put that caveat in the fill in the blank, the system will mark that as wrong. And again, you're now creating more work for yourself, because now you have to go back into that quiz, find out why it was wrong, regrade it, accept those points, and return the email back to Sally Ann because she wasn't happy about her quiz grade, right? So kind of do some of that pre-thought on the front end. If we're doing an informal setting here, we're just trying to make them familiar with the test taking and some of the terms that are coming up. Maybe multiple choice is what to do. But if you have certain things where you know the fill in the blank are going to work, that's fabulous. Just make sure that you caveat what specifically you're looking for. Tell the students, we're not using acronyms. Tell the students that if this needs to be a capital letter, it needs to be a capital letter in your answer. Otherwise, it's wrong, right? It's the same thing that we would caveat with a test. Okay, so those are conversations that need to be had on the front end, and then maybe that alleviates a little bit more back end work for you if something doesn't work correctly or if a student isn't successful on something. I'm popping up with questions here, so I'm gonna look at that. I don't know why my hovering does not like this screen. Okay, I'm gonna give that a second till it starts to work. My multiple choice question, here's the opportunity for you to tell the system how many points it's worth. So remember we talked about a benchmark number. If I'm doing 1, right, and I create 10 questions, that means my quiz is going to be out of 10 points. If I still want a 10-point quiz, but I only have 5 questions, you need to change this to 2 points so that it's still a 10-point quiz. If you're like me, I like everything out of 100. It's just easy to work with. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not, well, there's an argument about this. It's just everything's out of 100. It's nice and simple. So in this case, if I have 10 questions, each one of my questions is worth 10 points, right? If I get one wrong, I got a 90. If I get 2 wrong, I got an 80. And I'm just counting backwards. I just added a 0 on my powers of 10 there for all my 4th grade friends, as I would tell them. As I look at this, obviously, here's your box. This is where you type your question. This box gives you a whole lot more flexibility than just typing the question. Again, we talked about some of our early learners, right? Those people that were trying to maybe get them to see a particular word inside of a question, or draw their attention to a question stem, or draw their attention to the word first, or what would you do last? Things like that, that sometimes we know our students fly right over. Those are teaching opportunities. So in here, if we have those kind of questions, you have the ability to bold them, to underline them, to highlight them, whatever that might be, to give those students a little bit more of a, hey, pay attention to this. Because again, we're trying to make them better at this. We're trying to give them tools to be successful. We know that they can't take a highlighter into NCLEX and they can't underline that stuff, okay? You just read the question. But here we're building those brain mechanisms to say, oh, that would be a word I would normally highlight. Or, oh, that was a word that I would have bolded on my JERO test because that's something that's important, right? We have to build those successful thought processes for them to be successful throughout the program. This is an opportunity to do that. So think about that when you're designing these questions here. Okay, so obviously you have all your tools there. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. You could put anything in this box. If you wanted to link to an article and have them answer questions about an article, you can put a URL in here. If you wanted to put a YouTube video, have them watch a 2-minute clip and ask, a question about maybe what they did wrong or what they should have done better, or, a process that was done in the video, you can put the YouTube video right inside of the question. So we have a whole lot more functionality than just like, here's the 5 words of the question. We can go out on the branch a little bit more here. Not for all of us, but for those of us that maybe want to branch out a little bit or do something a little bit different, know that you have some of that functionality in there. I'm going to pause. I got questions. Can you? Okay, my accommodations question. We talked about accommodations. Can you put in a picture? Yes, you can put a picture into that window. I don't think there is an option for a hotspot question inside of this function. So no, there is not a diagram for you to be able to identify kind of where this is. We're stuck with the basics of question type. Would you take a minute to talk about the analytics? Absolutely, I will. Give me 1 second. Let me finish building the multiple choice question, and I will talk about the analytics as well. Okay, let me go back to the multiple choice question. My question's up here in the box, and then here are all my answer choices at the bottom. Canvas defaults to the first one being the correct answer. Obviously, when you're creating a quiz, you don't want the first one to be the correct answer all the time. So I encourage you to click in different places and change which one is the correct answer. It's as easy as that when you're clicking, okay? And then here inside of the box, these are just your answer choices, okay? So I'm just typing out what your different A, B, C, or D answer choices are. You do not need to put A, B, C, or D in front of it. You can if you would like, but if you chose shuffle answers at the beginning of this and you put A, B, C, or D here, then that means when Susan signs in, her questions are going to show up A, B, C, or D. When Mike signs in, it's going to show up B, C, D, A. When Bob signs in, it's going to show up C, D, B, C. And you're going to have all kinds of questions about why is this stuff all over the place. So if you choose that shuffle answer and you put A, B, C, and D, you're kind of doing a catch-22 here. I wouldn't put anything. I would just put the answer choices. You don't even need the A, B, C, or D because you're not going back and referring to it. You're not reviewing it in class. This is for them to see it. And then, of course, if you do need to review it in class, you can always just pull it up on Canvas and share your screen. You don't have to refer to the answer choices as A, B, C, or D. Okay, so let's say my answer choice here, C is the correct answer. I keep it there. I want to give Mary Ann Murtha a shout out here because we talked a little bit yesterday about putting in the rationale after questions. And you can see that here I have rationale boxes for each one of these answer choices, which would be kind of cumbersome. Now, when we do the import from the publisher, all of that comes over. But if you're doing this all by yourself, that's a lot to do. What she suggested, and it was a great idea, is this gray box, this last one here, when you hover over it, you'll see it says click to enter general comments. You put the rationale in there, it shows up for everyone no matter what they choose. So everyone gets to see the rationale no matter what happens across the board. You can see what the right answer is and why it should have been the right answer. If I only put it in for the wrong answers, I have to put it in 3 different places. And then if I have a different rationale for the correct answer, I have to put something different there. Here, if I put this in this final box, everyone gets to see the rationale no matter what they choose. So if you're creating, I would encourage you to use that general comments rationale in that case. I'm going to update my question. Again, everything has its own box. So make sure you save the in particular question. Here's my question number 1 that is worth 10 points. I can edit by clicking on the pencil. I can get rid of it by clicking on the X. And if I just had another question here, I can always move it up and down the same way you can with your other Canvas tool on your dots there. Okay, and that's question number 1. We had a little bit of questions about the analytics. When you look at the analytics on a test, and I would love to show you one, but no one has taken a quiz in here. What I think I can show you is maybe the analytics inside of our adjunct faculty. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because there's a few more things I need to talk about. Quizzes, module 1. Okay, 2 things. Quiz statistics shows me what went on in the quiz. The individual that asked about timing, here in moderate the quiz, this allows me to see the person, how many attempts they took, and I can click the pencil and edit. Because there was no time on this quiz, the timing is not in this feature, but when you click on moderate the quiz, this is the screen you would go to change the timing and to see how much time the student actually spent taking the quiz. Okay, so that is in moderate the quiz. And then of course here I have the quiz statistics. And this might take a little bit to come up. Here I can see my average score was 95, my high score was 100, my low was a 71. Standard deviation, time, and then here's your individual questions as to what people answered, how much they answered correctly, the number of respondents, and the percentages that they put for each single response. So it does a really good job of kind of just capturing, especially since we're using this as kind of a low-key kind of, and I apologize, my battery's dying on my computer. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. That's me not being attentive as a presenter. But fixed now. Okay, so we got a lot of good analytics there when we look at that. All right, let's see. So that was analytics. Let me go back to my quiz here, right? And in my quizzes, I see my unnamed quiz all the way down here at the bottom. Requires Respondus Lockdown Browser. Now, when you go in here, you have this here as well. Requires Respondus Lockdown Browser? Yes. But when I click on Edit, there is no setting on this screen that has anything to do with Respondus Lockdown Browser. okay? That setting sleeps over here on the left-hand side in Lockdown Browser tab. So you have to click out of quizzes. We leave quizzes and we go into Lockdown Browser. When we get in this area, I can see this is the Lockdown Browser speaking to my quizzes function. They're having a great conversation right now. It says, oh, hi, I see all these quizzes you have here. Look, none of these require the Respondus Lockdown Browser. The only thing I need to do if I want that on is I click my arrow next, I click settings, and I say require Lockdown Browser. Okay, now the students need to use that specific browser to be able to take that exam. Okay, and again, for the most part, we're using ExamSoft if we need something like that is done, because that is a tool we have and that's what students are paying for. I could see if we have something at a time crunch or something like that, we might need to utilize this tool, but just another function in here for you to look at. So I'll do save and close, and you'll notice that now my chapter 10 not only has the title, but tells me that my Respondus Lockdown Browser is required. And now I'm in green, required here as well. Okay, so you have to turn that function on for each of the individual quizzes. That was the fastest 50 minutes of my life. I have about 10 minutes, so I want to jump in. So if we have these analytics and also Respondus, why do we pay extra money for ExamSoft? That's a really good question. The answer to that question is because ExamSoft was here way before Respondus Lockdown Browser. And the Respondus Lockdown Browser just started here in spring. It's certainly a conversation that, you know, that we can have about, you know, going from one system to another. We also want to be aware that right now we have an administrator at this point, which is the awesome Dave Brown, being the admin and doing all the behind the scenes work for your tests. If we go to Respondus Lockdown Browser, all the behind the scene work now belongs to the instructor inside of their Canvas course. So we're kind of taking the responsibility and the onus of, you know, when your test comes, the email sent out to the students, you have a code, they show up, they put the code in, it's all there. But if we start moving this over to Respondus, we're kind of creating a whole new path for that of now you're creating that, you're creating the tests, you're sending the students the reminders, you know, all of those things that kind of go along with ExamSoft. So I don't know, Dr. Schwartz, that's certainly a question we can have down the road, and if people want to do that, but that's an option.
When this first actually came up, Anne was pretty adamant that we probably were not leaving ExamSoft, at least in the short term. I mean, maybe once we get post-COVID and we're back to normal, yeah, we can have that conversation. We're not changing anything.
Yeah, nothing's being changed in this calendar year or probably 2021. We don't need any new, any kind, correct, especially not for us and definitely not for the students. We don't need anything new. I agree with that. So yeah, but it's something to think about. So the person who posed that question, it's a great thing to think about. It's something that, you know, we can certainly talk about in the future. That capability, we now have that capability, which we did not have as of last March, you know, so that wasn't even a conversation before that.
And I think the other thing for those of you who want a little more control in ExamSoft, I know that Dave and Andrew could work with you to give you a little bit more control of some of those things in there. If that's something that you choose to do, that wasn't a real option in the past. And I think you're going to see a little bit more flexibility. So if you're tech savvy and if you're comfortable in ExamSoft, then there are some things that you want to do. We can figure out how to make that happen for you.
Yes, and actually, Rose, that was a marvelous segue. Upcoming professional development, importing your questions into ExamSoft. Woohoo! Coming the first week of August. Check your calendars next week. All right, so actually, that is the next professional development coming up. So be on the lookout for that if you're looking to be a little bit more independent in ExamSoft. And I know a lot of us just roll over questions. That's perfectly fine. As long as you're going in, you're looking at analytics, you're vetting those questions, you're using ones from prior semesters, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And Dave can just copy that stuff over. But if you want to put new stuff in and you want to change some things up and use some of the new features and some of the different question types that they may have available, we're going to try to make that available for you now that, we're kind of making a transition there. So we can put a little bit more details and onus on the new side of things than where things were prior. So that's coming up in August. Be on the lookout for that. All right. I want to jump into how you get all of this wonderful information from a publisher, because I did not create these 73 quizzes. I did not create any of the questions. I did not create any of the analytics. None of that was done by me. And when you go in and you look at these, I'm going to take in here real quick before I go to the publisher website. Let me just go to chapter 1 and do my edit here. Excuse me. Notice that when you do this, some settings did come over here. These quizzes are allowing the students to have multiple attempts and keeping their highest score. So if that's not something you want, you will have to go in and change that setting. This is also allowing students to see their responses and see the correct answers, not at a certain date or time, but right then, right when they're done. So that's also something you want to think about. So again, even though these imports from the publishers come through with a good amount of information and a great amount of questions, not all of it is stuff that we need. So we certainly need to vet through, make sure the settings are correct, make sure the questions are correct. Here's a look at those questions. Let me just hit edit here. You can see you get the questions, what they are, and then here are your different rationales that are already in there from the publisher. Okay, so you can go through, look at those, put an eye on them, decide what you want. Obviously, the questions are, go down here and hit cancel. There's too many here, so I don't need 40 questions in my pre-quiz. I can hit X, trash, 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 and get rid of them. Another shout out to Donna Callahan yesterday. She said, wouldn't it be a good idea to just take the quizzes that come over from the publisher and make a copy of them so you always have those same 40 questions? And I thought, Donna, if I could high five you, I would. Yes, that is a great idea. If you take your original quiz that has the 40 questions and you come to your quizzes here, and on the 3 dots on the right-hand side, you hit copy. Now you have a copy of that entire quiz. You can modify the copy, make that your pre-quiz, have your 10 questions, make another copy, make that your post-quiz, have your 10 questions, and now you have a pre, a post, and the original 40 questions. So if you need an opportunity for some different questions, or you need to pull some questions out, put some questions in, or maybe students need a little bit more help with that information, they haven't seen all the questions from chapter 1 and you still have them. If you go into this first one and you start deleting questions, you now have lost part of that 40 whole, right? We deleted 2 questions, you only have 38 questions now. So great idea to keep the 40 whole, make a copy of it, and now I can delete whenever I want to. I have my copy, and then I still have my 40 whole. Does that make sense?
And I just want to remind you all that all of these test banks students can purchase. So I would encourage you to read the questions, alter them a little bit so that somebody didn't go out and buy all the test questions.
Yeah. All right, so let me show you where we get these questions from. I'm going to The Point, which a lot of us are involved in because we have Lippincott products. If you do not have a Lippincott product, you have a publisher website. The same language is being used across publishers. So what I'm telling you to look for here on The Point is the same thing you need to look for inside of another publisher's product. Okay, so they're using the same language. So let me click here on my MedSurg book, go to my course content, and inside of my course content, I have a whole bunch of information. Obviously, I have the things that the students can see, which is all the knowledge acquisition stuff. The stuff that's labeled instructor only is just that. You're the only one who can see it. A lot of good information in there. So if for some reason you haven't been in, your publisher stuff, a great place to look. But that's a whole separate conversation. Today we are looking for LMS course cartridges, okay? If it doesn't say LMS inside your publisher, it should say cartridges. That seems to be the term that is used across the board for everyone, okay? It's called a cartridge across the board. So look for that word. Here we're gonna click LMS course cartridges, and we get a couple depending on what LMS you're using. We use the LMS Canvas. That is our learning management system. We used to use the LMS Campus Cruiser, right? Other places might use Angel or Blackboard or Moodle. Notice there's nothing Canvas listed here. That's because we are the end all be all of the best, and Canvas takes all of these. So any one you want to pick is perfectly fine. I encourage you to kind of stick to the ground level. That's what I did. I just went for Common Course Cartridge. It does all of them. I did try all of them. You kind of get, it reads it a certain way. You get different things. I know the course cartridge works for what we're using. So look for the Common Course Cartridge. When I click on that, I get a zip folder, okay? The zip folder is a massive amount of information. Do not open the zip folder. You won't even know what you're looking at, okay? Just leave the zip folder in your downloads. I'm saving it. It's going to my downloads here in my browser the same way any other download would from anywhere else that I took it from, okay? Now, I've downloaded it. I now want to take that information, the LMS course cartridge, and give it to my Canvas book, right? My Canvas class, okay? So here, inside of my course, I'm gonna come down to settings. And again, this is always something I can help you with. I'm covering it here, and I'm covering it here very fast because we're at the tail end of this session. So if you're like, wow, I really wanna do this, I have no idea how to do it, shoot me an email, I will gladly help you. Inside of my settings on the right-hand side, I have import course content. Self-explanatory. I'm taking something and I'm putting it inside of my course. Okay, so inside of my import, what am I importing? What did we choose? We chose the Common Cartridge. Notice that those other things that we saw are listed there. There's the Angel, there's the Blackboard, there's the Moodle. Okay, so if you want to do those things, they are listed there. I just went with Common Cartridge. I choose the Common Cartridge. I bring that file from my downloads, because remember, I downloaded it from the website, right? So I have to take the file from my downloads and open it so that it sees it. Okay, I'm allowed to pick my question bank. Yesterday, none of these were here. It made all of these after the import. So you're gonna start with a new question bank or whatever you would like to title it. And then in this case, I did all content. If you do select specific content, it allows you to select information that would go in modules, information that would go in files, and information that would go in quizzes. If you do all content, it gives it all to you. Okay, none of it's published. And if you don't want it, you just go in and delete it. So if you want to go through in the front end and say, I only want the quizzes, then you do select specific content. If you want it all, you do all content. After I do all content, here's my one from yesterday, July 7th at 1:55. This was completed. Or I should say that's when it started. That was not when it was completed, because I started yesterday at 1:55. But it is completed. Once it was completed, it gave me all of these quizzes here that you saw prior. It also gave me a ridiculous amount of resources inside of my modules. When I click on modules here, come on, Joe. Modules. Come on. There we go. This is all the stuff I already have in the class. Here's all the stuff it put in here. Like literally, I could scroll for days. There is every single chapter has about 13 different things under it, from learning objectives to PowerPoints to case studies to pre-lecture quizzes to suggested critical thinking exercises. You know, there's so much stuff here, stuff that could be useful to you and stuff that probably isn't useful to you, but stuff that you could put an eye on, decide if you would like to use. I would encourage you to do so. I'm going to not publish that stuff because my informatics students would be extremely confused as to what all this information is. I'm going to pause, check my questions because it's 2:02. It does not like my hover. Let me stop my share real quick. Nope, there we go. Chat. Make 2 copies, one for the pre-test, one for the post-test. Beautiful. Yes, it is beautiful. And yes, if you have Evolve, that's perfectly fine. You're looking for the same thing. You're looking for an LMS Quartz cartridge so that you can put that information in there. We covered, again, a ridiculous amount of information in the last 60 minutes. I apologize if I went too fast at some places. This is being recorded, and the session yesterday was recorded as well. So either today late or tomorrow early, I will get an email out to everyone with that information. And if this is something you want to sit down and you want to look at on an individual basis, or you want to sit down and you want to look at, you know, with the other people that are teaching in your section or with other colleagues, please shoot me an email. I will be more than happy to sit down and look at the same thing, go a little bit further with the Respondus Lockdown browser, go a little bit further with the imports. Anything you want to look at is perfectly fine for me. You are the reason I have a job, so I am perfectly happy to help. Is there any other questions that I can answer for you at this time?
This was really helpful, Andrew.
Thank you, Rosa. I
Andrew,
appreciate
this
that.
was wonderful.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, O'Kane. I appreciate you. All right. If that is it, I'm going to stop the recording. Like I said, be on the lookout for our next professional development. It's going to be centered around ExamSoft and kind of using Word to create questions and what that template looks like, and then some of the settings inside of there. So be on the lookout either at the end of this week or early next week for those new calendar invites for August. If I haven't met with you individual with Donna Callahan, please go into Acuity and sign up for those sessions. We have been sending those out. If you don't know what I'm talking about, chances are you haven't been checking your email. So please make sure you go in and you look for those. I would love to have some time and look at your courses with you for fall. All right, fabulous job. I'm going to end this session and I will see you all the next time you send me an email.